Hey everybody, welcome to the iProv Made podcast, where we help you run your practice like a profitable business. Today, as always, I've got my co-host, RJ Martino. What's up, RJ?
Hey, Jordan. Excited about our guest today.
I am too. Tell us who it is.
So Dr. Burton is a partner at the Women's Clinic here in Little Rock, Arkansas. They are well known as one of the top OBGYN practices in the state. He is known very well. You see him everywhere. If there is a face of OBGYN successful practices, it's probably his, because he is so well known in the community.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to hear about it because, he and I have been personal friends. His practice actually delivered my children. And so we've known each other for a long time. And I've gotten to hear that even though it looks easy, they make it look easy. That, just like every other business out there, there are hard times, there are tough times, but there's also high moments. So he talks a lot about that.
Absolutely. Both of my nieces were also delivered by the Women's Clinic. He's a personal friend of both of ours, and he's also been a marketing client for the past 6 or 7 years too. So we know him personally. We're excited that he's allowed us to kind of share his story with you guys. And I think for those practice owners, whether you're an old vet and you're listening to this, or you're somebody who's thinking about starting a practice yourself or getting into business, I think he brings up a lot of really good points that everyone needs to hear. So without further ado, I'm excited for you guys to hear his story. Dr. Brian Burton.
Welcome to the iProv Made podcast, where we help you build a better, more profitable healthcare practice. I got my co-host with me, Jordan Smith.
What's up, everybody? How are you, RJ?
I'm doing well, man. I'm excited. I have a friend on today who is an Arkansas native. He and I have been close friends for a long time, and he has built a great practice. I mean, if you talk around town and you talk about great OBGYN practices here in Little Rock, one of the names that you're going to hear all the time is the Women's Clinic. And represented here is Dr. Brian Burton.
Good morning. How are you guys?
Good. How are you, Doc?
Great. Looks like you might be a little better outside in the sunny weather.
Listen, this is the COVID schedule. It is the relaxed at-home parent teaching kind of day. And so we're doing this kind of in the midst of all that. So,
well, I love that we kind of get to see the authenticity of it. Before we hopped on, you talked a little bit about your schedule. Sometimes physicians feel like their job's hard. It's got to be hard whenever you've got a schedule like yours. You want to tell the crew what your days look like so far?
Yeah, just kind of during this whole pandemic thing, it's been crazy. I've only, I kind of calculated out normal week for me when I'm at full speed is seeing between 110 and 120 patients a week. And during this pandemic, it's been about 25 a week.
Wow.
So it's a huge change in our schedule. And, honestly, it goes back to kind of the whole point of this podcast is how to build a successful practice. Goes into being able to support your staff and your practice during a time like this. And man, we have been absolutely blessed beyond belief. And in a situation that has kept us alive during all this, which has been pretty phenomenal. And talking to other physicians and seeing other practices and how they've had to make changes and layoffs and salary cuts and all, we have just been pretty blanketed from a lot of that, which has been a real blessing.
No,
Yeah.
That's great. I want to dig into that. But before I do that, I kind of want to just set the stage. Would you mind kind of giving us a little history about yourself and how you grew up?
Sure. So, I grew up in Arkansas. My dad was a urologist for 36 years in Hot Springs, and his dad, my grandfather, was a general surgeon in Hot Springs. He finished up in World War II and then came and opened a practice that when he retired on a Friday, my dad kind of took over on a Monday, 2 days later. And it was a private practice, physician owned, physician driven, non-employed practice. And so growing up, man, that was all I knew. And that's how I thought all doctors were. And it wasn't until I was much older that I realized a lot of other physicians are managed differently, employed differently. So I always wanted and envisioned that for me. And so I grew up, went to University of Arkansas in Fayetteville, and then went to med school at University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences in Little Rock. And then, did OBGYN because I kind of swore that was something I would never do with my life. And it just kind of ended up being what I fell in love with and what I wanted to do. And so when I was in training, which I also trained at UAMS, and I looked all over the place for places to train, and I just decided that this is what I wanted. And when I was in residency, I wanted a practice that was what I was used to, right? A private practice that was a small group, physician-owned, physician-driven, decisions made by physicians for patient care, and I wanted that for my practice. So that's, man, and how that all happened was just a total land in my lap kind of thing. So.
Well, before we get into that, you had talked just a little bit about it, but tell us about your vision and how you thought owning the practice would look before you actually jumped in there versus what it was like.
Yeah.
Day two.
Because we've got, we know the listeners out there. There's some folks that are working in an established practice. There's some that are office managers, but there's also a lot of people who are, in the shoes that you just mentioned, right? They're a provider, and they're trying to work towards owning their own practice and building their own vision for what that looks like. So I'm curious to be able to kind of go back a couple decades and kind of pick young Dr. Burton's head to see what he was going through at that point.
Yeah,
man, I tell you, I got a little bit lucky in that I was it was kind of handed to me in a way. You kind of think it's going to be easy. You kind of think, or at least I did. Maybe that's just me being pretty naive. You go to work and you do procedures and you take care of people and you get paid for it, right? And you just have a bank account and that's it, right? Well, man, it's a lot more complex than that. And from insurance contracts and malpractice, and how do you manage durable goods and your contracts for that, and your staying on staff and staying in good standing, and how do you stay board certified, and when are this due and when is that due, and how do you keep your prescription privileges with the DEA, and how do you keep up with your continuing medical education, and how do you, and man, it is a whole lot of hoops, and it's a lot of jumping, and we have some staff that work for us that have just been profoundly instrumental in doing that, and it has made it so easy for me in my practice, and I think a lot of physicians do a lot of that themselves. And a lot of people struggle with that and spend a lot of time doing that. And I'm not so sure that's so stressful. And I think time is better spent doing other things and maybe outsourcing that or paying people to help with that. I'm not a huge proponent of spend money to make money in some areas, but I am in others. Time is definitely one of those things that you just can't get that back. And so if you're spending tons of time doing that kind of stuff, then you're not doing others time spending with other things. Right. So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question or not.
No, you did. I mean, that was a perfect explanation for it. If you could go back to young Dr. Burton, what would you have done early? We're still kind of early talking about you getting started, but out of just in training, even, what would you have taken any other path, experienced other things, or done this quicker?
Man, that's a great question. And I wrestle with that one sometimes. I spent a month, my fourth year of med school at University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And I spent a month out there doing a GYN oncology internship. And man, it was so eye-opening and so enlightening. And I learned probably more in that 1 month there than I learned in a lot of months and a lot of time training at UAMS. Not for any other reason, but just the volume and the sheer capacity they had and the numbers they had and the acuity they had was just from a medical standpoint. But that was pretty profound. And during that time, I saw an opportunity to train elsewhere, and I really considered training elsewhere. And I spent a lot of time interviewing at other places, and nobody told me probably the thing that just I got lucky with more than anything. And I don't know if it was luck, but depending on what you want your practice to look like, where you train is really important. We always thought that getting the best training was important for your practice, right? And of course that is, right? I mean, you have to be adequately trained. But a lot of where you train is who you meet.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of who you meet in your training helps you establish your practice, because depending on what you do, you need a referral source. You need, you know, if you're the most specialized in a field, that's great. But if you don't have ancillary staff and support to help you, man, you're going to struggle, right? If you don't have an interventional pulmonologist to do transesophageal lymph node biopsies, and you're the best chest surgeon ever, well, you can't do these chest surgeries if you don't have that guy to help you. So you kind of have to pay attention to where you are and who's around you to know. And so it takes kind of some foresight in the beginning. You know, in Arkansas, so I'm from here, went to school here, went to college here. And so I know a lot of people, and that has really been a beneficial part to my practice. Mm-hmm. Training here has been big. I've talked to other physicians who said, man, I didn't realize going away for my training was going to impact my referral source as much as it has. And they train it at, Brigham and Women's or Yale or, these phenomenal programs that they've gotten a great education. Not that their education's better than mine or mine's better than theirs, but
no, yeah, we get it.
Just from a setting up a practice standpoint, what that's done is huge. And I can imagine, we talked earlier about you having a lot of dentists. I can imagine that oral surgeons or dentists and where they get their referral sources, man, that, you got to get people through the door.
Yeah.
So you got to get them out there. And
speaking of training, you mentioned something earlier that I do not want to gloss over, where you mentioned, you guys are blanketed over, or you guys are blanketed from some of the issues that, you're hearing from other physician and other practice owners during COVID. But that's not an accident. So from a business acuity standpoint, right, we talk to doctors all the time, and you're unique where, you're great from a doctor side, but you've also got, in our opinion, a really acute business mind also. So where did you pick that up? Was that through training? Was that just through osmosis? Was it just really hard lessons where you?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I don't know that answer. I don't have a business sense in some fashion, but I do in others. I think a lot of it comes from when I joined the women's clinic. I was a 2-year, it's kind of a 2-year salary guarantee thing. And then, I didn't see the books. I didn't know how the practice was. And the guys were like, the practice is fine. It's all good. And I was like, okay, great.
Yeah.
And then when I became a partner and I saw the books, things weren't great. And I think it was kind of then I had this kind of epiphany of, okay, this isn't okay. We need to turn this around. How do we do it? And in all honesty, I just started asking questions, right? I remember our office manager had been there for 10 years and our senior partner had been there for, almost 20 years. Unfortunately, we had one partner who was just diagnosed with very advanced lung cancer that he ultimately passed away from. One guy just retired. One guy retired a year before. They had just taken on a new partner. I mean, the practice was in this transition from kind of some of the older guys to the newer guys, with one guy kind of bridging the gap. And it was difficult to kind of go through. Here's Oliver. So during that transition, I asked questions. Why do we use this particular CPA? What is this CPA doing for us? Do we have an attorney that works on our contracts? Who is that? Why, when I had my contract written, did it take 6 months to get that back? It shouldn't take 6 months to get a contract back. Why? And asking those questions, we started kind of thinking about solutions and problems. The CPA, for example, that we were using had been the CPA for 25 years in our practice. Well, we had a massive net operating loss. And I didn't even know what a net operating loss was, right? And so we kind of started interviewing other CPA firms, and they said, yeah, you guys can use all this loss to do things to build your practice without having to spend any money, really. I mean, you spent money, but it was all different. And that really, just changing our CPA firm made a massive difference. The other thing that my practice learned the hard way was, in medicine, your income comes from working, right? There is no ancillary income, really, right? It's you either work and make money, or you don't work and don't make money, right? It's kind of like lawyers and
Eat
doctors.
what you kill.
Yeah, it really kind of is. And so if you lose a high volume producer for a certain amount of time, then you can be in trouble. A practice can really be in trouble. For example, one of our partners before I started was riding a horse and broke his pelvis and was out for 6 months. And he was one of the number one producers. And so that loss of income for the clinic was huge. And so we got a insurance policy on that loss of income for the practice, right? And so it was a pretty inexpensive policy that covered his income for overhead. It wasn't a huge amount, but man, that made a big difference. And so unfortunately, when our next partner was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and he passed away, that policy was in place. And then when our next partner, who was diagnosed with an advanced lung cancer, was diagnosed and he had to retire like that day, that policy really, really, really allowed us some leeway. That made a huge difference.
Well,
So,
I think just coupled with what Jordan said, even having the foresight, one of our, what we call kind of our baby steps is accountability. And often, doctors, physicians are the world's worst at just throwing money at problems and not thinking about it at all. And it could have been real easy for you as a new partner to just do nothing and say, hey, I don't know, this is just the way we've always done it. But it takes someone going in and asking those kind of questions. We've got listeners who email us, a large group of listeners are talking about turnaround practices. And nobody wants to be in that case. Sometimes you just look up and you're there. It's like you have to be so sick and tired of being so sick and tired of being sick and tired, so tired of doing it the same way that you have to do something about it. Was it just natural curiosity, or was there a point where you said, okay, enough's enough, I got to get in here and do something?
It's kind of both. And I say that because it was natural curiosity, but then, when you're in a practice, especially when you're the young guy and you start questioning the way your older guys are doing things, you can really make some relationships go pretty sour, right?
Yeah. Well, imagine a 10-year relationship with something as intimate as a financial or CPA relationship that you could ruffle some feathers. I could see that.
Yeah. I mean, basically I said, hey, we need to fire the CPA that y'all have been paying for 25 years. And we need to do something different. But the way I approached that was, hey, have we ever thought about this? And it was like, well, no, I hadn't really thought about that. And it's like, well, what if we just had somebody look at our stuff and just say, hey, because the thing is, other, you know, we're professionals in some things. You guys are professionals in what you do. I'm a professional in what I do. I need other professionals to help me do what I do better, right? You guys do too. It's part of all of our business. There is an interconnected weave or web that is necessary to run a business, right? You have to have bankers. You have to have insurance people. You have to have web people. You have, period, end of it. And so getting people to come in and just look at your stuff, most companies, most people will do that for free. And you can have them come in and evaluate you and see what it is. And that can even just give you ideas to spin off of. And I think it's important to evaluate what you do and why you do it. Now, sometimes you don't know why you're doing something, and sometimes you don't know you need to evaluate something until it's too late.
Yeah.
And that we've all, who would have ever thought about a pandemic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And of course our insurance doesn't cover that. So, but to go back to your question, RJ, it started off with a natural curiosity, but then once you start asking questions and once you start seeing things, it's, well, why didn't we do this sooner? What if we consider that now? What if we look at that deeper? What if we,
because I can't tell you how many practices we either talk to from, this lens through the podcast or through the marketing side of things, where everybody says, yeah, I'm busier than ever. And I'm busier than I was last year, but I'm making less money than I was. That's the deal is whenever you ask those partners at the time, how's the practice? We're busy, so we're good. The numbers are what the numbers are, but we're busy, so I'm sure it's fine. And a lot of people just get blinded by that.
Yeah. And that's always a continued question, because, there's probably the thing I want to talk about the most is when you build a practice, it's not always about income, right? And I think that is a very common theme that people look at when they talk about building a practice. Mm-hmm. I think building a practice is surrounding yourself with people that want to do the right thing for patients. Mm-hmm. Now, you want to do the right thing at the right time, and you want to really take care of people. But at the same time, you want to do it efficiently and effectively so that your outcomes are good, your relationships are good. And if you do that right, people see that and they just know, man, this is where I need to be. This is what needs to happen. This is where I need to go. Mm-hmm. And, RJ, you said in the beginning, like when people talk about, you talk about OBGYNs, the women's clinic, it's because we don't chase ancillary money and do gimmicky things to make money. Mm-hmm. We do the right thing all the time and do it well. And that just translates to good healthcare.
All right. So you mentioned a couple of those kind of keys to success that you've followed that's got you to this point. What are some other things that you guys are doing at the women's clinic that you think is contributing to that ongoing success?
Yeah. So, one of the things that when I started going to our monthly meetings years ago, it was all kind of mundane. It was all kind of the same thing. And so I suggested that we have a plan and we say, what are our goals? And, that's something that oftentimes you don't think about. You think, okay, well, our goals are to show up and work and go home, right? And see patients and do that. But you have to have goals from a business standpoint, right? And so every month we talk about what are our 1-year goals, what are our 5-year goals, and what are our 10-year goals. Because you have to start thinking about, we all work and put money away to retire. And so you got to plan for people retiring. So that's typically on your 10-year plan at some point, right? Mm-hmm. I hope at some point. And then, your 1-year plan might be, how do I get this insurance contract? Or what do I need to do to add a new partner? Or what do I need to do? Do we need to reevaluate our medical malpractice? That's something that we switched at one point, not that long ago, 2 years ago, and found out it was terrible. And we switched to a different company. And And so, your 1 year plan seemed to be kind of where your staffing issues fall in and where your short-term growth issues fall in. Do we need to add more imaging? Do we need to revamp our lab? Do we need to do, those are kind of those 1 year plans, but continually seeking growth, I think, is really important. That's something that we've all talked about at length. And, some of my partners don't necessarily agree with that plan, and it's fine. We're doing well. And that's something that just has to be continually discussed, at every point. But definitely going through the motions of, again, kind of asking questions about where we see ourselves in a practice, in a group, in a community, in a hospital, in a field, in a specialty. How does all that fit together? So,
I love that you talked about it, because it really aligns with kind of what we're always talking about at the organization. And so you understand the framework in which we look at it. You've laid a lot of it out. I mean, the very first thing is, as physicians, as dentists, a lot of times you guys are listening to symptoms all the time and trying to figure out what the problem is. And, that's ultimately what we're doing whenever we talk with a lot of our audience members, is we're just listening to their problems. And those are usually symptoms of some deeper problem. But if you're not looking for the problems, if you're not asking questions and you're not digging into those symptoms, you're not going to fix that problem. And that goes to number 2, which you did. Number 2 for us is you got to be a practice owner and act like an owner, and know that, we can't be 4-year-olds. We can't just stomp our feet and ask for problems to go away. We actually got to be very accountable to make those problems go away. You got to ask the questions, and then you've got to dig in and say, hey, I want to get involved. Let me look at our contract with that group. You've got to get involved. You can't get something for nothing. And so you talked a lot about that. And so with the symptoms, with willing to take accountability, we then triage. And step 1 for us on the triage part is making sure that there is some vision for the future, that, you guys are looking at a 10-year plan. I think you might not be surprised, but how many practices run day to day? They're never looking out past what's right in front of them. And I love hearing that has been a key to your success, because I would tell you, and every other business owner, whether it's a physician-owned practice or it's a plumber, if you don't have a vision for the future, you can't really build a strategy for how to get there.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a good strategy, you also can't develop tactics on, okay, this is what we're going to do this year. If all the time what we want to do as business owners, you and even me included, is we want to just buy the tactic. Oh yeah. This guy's saving my friend a fortune on taxes. Let's use him. That's very tactical. You really need that 10-year plan, breaking it down to a 1-year plan strategy. And then you can look at tactics. But it isn't until you do that long-term thinking and you planning that really you can then start engaging your team, or engaging even partners that are going to help you succeed. So what you've described has just been, spot on to what we've seen with people that have been successful, either turning around, starting, or dominating a marketplace. So that's been a great story.
I think the other thing too, RJ, is that, when you start planning, you start thinking. And when you're thinking about something, you're thinking about it not just there at the meeting, but you're thinking about it somewhere else. And then you read something, or you see something, or you meet somebody and you say, oh, well, this guy, he does logistics, but his logistics is weird. And I could see how that would play into what I'm doing. And let me ask him how he did this. I talked to a restaurant owner not too long ago, and man, he sent me a podcast on leadership, and looking at that and seeing that kind of made me change some of the way I manage my staff. And it's just amazing when you just talk and you listen, how that affects things. And you have to be willing to make changes too. You can't be so concrete in where you are that you just don't do anything different, because I've said from day one, if you're not doing anything different, you're falling behind.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, it stinks. As humans, it takes us almost filing bankruptcy before we start saving money. It takes us almost letting our doors close to our business before and we know it. You know, you and I and every business owner in the world have hired consultants, and they walk in the door and they tell us stuff we already know. But it's like we have to be so sick and tired before we act. And I just wish we could change it, but it is just how we're built, how we're made up. So great stuff. Another question I've got on, we talk about engaging your team, whether it's your internal team or even your outside. You've talked a little bit about this, but from your perspective, what team members are really critical for your success?
You know, the first person I think about that's critical for us is our office manager. You know, in my 10 years at our practice, we've had two. The first one was okay. You know, we had to look over her shoulder, not at all the little things, but at a lot of things. And we had to repeatedly ask her to do things. And then she moved to a different career. And we got a new office manager, and that, oh my goodness, that has been a saving grace. And what that's done for us has been huge. And she looks for ways to help us be more efficient and productive. I think, you know, you said it in throwing money at things, or, you know, you just can't do that. It's easy to think that. It's easy to think, oh, well, I have a good income. I have a high income. I'm a high earner. I'm just going to push money at things. And you can't always do that. Right. Yeah. Sometimes it's about saving money, and it's about reevaluating policies and procedures, and nobody likes to do that. Nobody likes that, but you have to. I mean, that's the reason there's HR departments, right? So,
and it's also about finding organizations that have the same core values as you guys too, and that think the same way that you do, right?
And surprisingly, it's really hard to do that in medicine. And I mean, I would assume it is in a lot of businesses too, but to find people who are competent medically, that are aligned the same ethically and spiritually, and to blend all that together and have the same kind of business savvy, or whatever, it's like a herd of unicorns, you know? I mean, it just doesn't happen.
I mean, you said it earlier, you know, every one of us thinks, oh, this is great. I'm going to practice. Patients are going to come see me. I'm going to hire people that will take care of those people. I'm going to partner with professionals that do what I'm not an expert in. And it sounds so easy, you know, and you said it already. It is so hard. I mean, there are so many pieces. I often think if I wanted to be a physician, I don't know if owning your own practice is the best way to go out and practice medicine. For someone struggling with that concept, because, you know, as they dig in, they do realize people say it's a lot harder. You always think, oh, it was hard for you, but it's going to be easy for me. But, you know, someone going through that, have you got thoughts on that?
Man, absolutely. So, you know, my wife is also a physician, and she is employed. She is completely and totally an employed physician, and her income is based on production, and she has really very, very, very little control over her staff. For example, one of her nurses quit last week, and she wasn't even told that her nurse quit. I mean, she didn't know. Like, she kind of heard it in the hallway, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
It's her nurse, right? She has nurses, but it was one of her nurses.
Yeah.
And so she is, in her place of employment, the same as anybody else, right? I mean, it's an employee. There's some advantages and disadvantages to that, right? It's easy because you don't have to deal with all the business aspect of it, but it's harder in that you lose a lot of autonomy. You know, I wouldn't, and it could be the way I grew up, I wouldn't have my practice any other way. I do not want to be owned. I want to make my decisions. I want to do things the way I want to do them. And if I have an employee that's, you know, on their Instagram or Facebook Live in the middle of clinic saying things, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm going to let them go. Right.
Mhm.
I have that autonomy.
That's right.
And there's a lot to that. And I think each person really has to ask what they want. Right. We see in my field in OBGYN, a lot of people that are finishing training are women, and young women statistically tend to start families at some point, right? And so they don't want to worry about running a practice while dealing with maternity leave and starting a family. And some people are wanting to be just shift work and do a laborist kind of program. And so everybody has their own wishes and desires. I think it's important to ask yourself what you want out of your practice.
Okay, let me ask you a different question before we kind of run into our final round of questions, because I know we're running short of time. We want to be respectful of your time. A lot of our audience has so much information. There's only so many hours in the day, and you've got to be practicing a lot of those numbers. And then you get off and you're told numbers by a marketing team, and it's a slew of numbers. You're told numbers from your accountant, and it's a slew of numbers. You're told numbers from your front desk girls, and it's a slew of numbers. What numbers are you looking at that are really important to you? Are there these numbers that you're saying, hey, I'm going to watch these numbers and that's it? Or do you literally look at all of them?
I think I thought he was done. It's not quite done. You got your question in, so I'll answer it. Don't worry. Oh, he was done a while back. He's going up and down the fairway, so now he's going to turn around and come this way. It's going to be louder.
Well, you're fine. We're fine anyway.
Yeah, you got your question in, so I'll answer it here in just a second. Yeah, sorry, the kid's piano teacher was calling on FaceTime on another device, and the kids were ignoring it, and 2 kids were watching TV, and they should have. I mean,
man, I've always told Amy and the kids that I'm not getting you guys this phone. I'm not getting phones. I'm not. And now I get to the point where I'm like, I get it. I want to give my kids phone just because they'll stop asking me for my phone. I don't even have my phone or my iPad 50% of the time whenever I'm at the house because the kids are bothering me for it.
Yeah.
Kids never get my phone. Never. They haven't played on my phone in 2 years.
I got to set that precedent. The problem is I broke it, and it's like now trying to, put the toothpaste back in the tube.
Yeah. I know. We got lucky. Okay, I'll answer your question here in a second. Okay. So to answer your question about looking at numbers, RJ, I think you have to look at all of them. I really do. And you have to decide what's important, right? Are you going to care more about your, for example, you can always get more patients in the office, right? But it doesn't make sense to get all these patients in the office who don't have a payer source. And not that you don't need to take care of patients, even sometimes patients who have lost their insurance or whatever. And having an efficient practice gives you that opportunity, right? So if you don't look at all the numbers and understand what's coming at you, then you really can't understand what is important to you. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes perfect sense.
What you think is the most important thing, it isn't, right? I mean, is the most important thing to get 200 patients through the door every day? Well, that'd be great. But if all of them have a payer source that's terrible, that doesn't do you any good. Not that it doesn't do you any good. Yeah, you can make a living that way, but your overhead's going to go up and your reimbursement's going to go down.
Yep.
So that's going to affect your efficiency. So to have a blend, so that when your neighbor calls you and says, listen, my daughter just lost her insurance and she just really needs something taken care of. Is there any way? And you go, you know what? Yeah, I can. I'll be glad to see her and take care of her, and we'll do what we can do. And I'll walk her through this whole process because I've got a healthy practice that can absorb that. Right. And that gives, owning my own practice and doing what the way we do it gives me that ability to do that.
I love that. Just said again, because it's worth repeating, having an efficient office allows you the opportunity to bless others. When when we've all seen it. We've got friends who do it. When you have an inefficient practice, you want to help those people, but you can't. You're trying to keep your head above water, and so I think that's just a great message.
Well, and then as a provider, just the added stress to that. I know I've got 27 employees that are non-providers that depend on us. I mean, that's 27 families that have to eat and pay their bills and do their, it's a lot of pressure on you to do that, and so when you feel like you have to just churn out the numbers to provide for them, that's not a healthy practice, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think you should want to love to go to work. I think you should want to enjoy taking care of patients. And when that line is crossed, I think you have to kind of reevaluate where you are. When you don't enjoy it anymore. And if you look at the numbers in physicians coming out of practice or coming into practice, their satisfaction rates are terrible,
Mm-hmm.
right? Why is that? Or oftentimes it's because they're being told what they have to do. You got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this way. You got to, in order to get reimbursed, you got to code this way, and you got to do, you're just inundated with that.
Mm-hmm.
So the joy in what you do for a living has to come from somewhere, right? If something's going to pull me away from my kids and my wife, I got to like doing it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what I get paid.
Yeah.
And so you have to love it. And so in order to love it, you got to find that blend.
Love it. I think, I think you're speaking to the soul of a lot of our listeners, and they needed to hear that. And even I need to hear it too, as just a business owner. There's a lot of smart business acumen in those paragraphs there. The last thing we do is kind of this final round of questions and kind of wrapping up. And, we always talk about businesses are in the business to create repeatable results, reliable results. We want kind of, you want to walk in and know what you're getting. That's what a business does, is it creates these repeatable results. And so we ask if there was just one strategy that, if our audience were listening to and you said, hey, implement this strategy every day. And if you do it every day, you're going to get results. It's like run every day, and you don't have to be faster the next day. You just got to get out there and do this. If they did something every day, what would you tell them that one thing would be?
Do the right thing. Do the right thing every time. And sometimes, sometimes you find yourself in a hurry and you're like, okay, I got to get through this real quick and then I can go to this. And anytime you try to make something go faster, what happens?
You mess up. Yeah.
Blows up. Almost every time.
Yeah.
So you do the right thing every time, and your results come out. Whether it's, and I'm not saying the right thing financially, I'm just saying do the right thing. Take care of people. That's why we do what we do.
That's great. There's another question, but that's such a nice little ending that I almost just that's a perfect little thing to go out on. But Dr. Burton, you've given some great advice here. If there's folks out there and they've got questions, or they're in your shoes, or they're in your shoes from where you were right whenever you started with your partnership, how can they, if they've got questions for you guys or just want to learn more about you, what's some ways that they can kind of reach out to you or find out more about the Women's Clinic?
We have a great website. But yeah, I love having people that get in touch with us and ask us questions. Our email's on there, my phone number's on there. But I absolutely, I think mentorship kind of opportunities are something that doesn't exist anymore like it should. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure not saying that I do everything right, because there's plenty of mistakes that we all make. But we've got a definitely successful practice now that didn't exist 7 years ago, mm-hmm. 5 years ago. Where we are now is so different than where we were. That I think bringing people in and just talking to them and helping people understand and asking questions. I love young physicians and people who are struggling. I love talking to them and just kind of see them, because oftentimes, RJ, you said it already, it's there. You pay people to come do things, but you already know the answers. You just gotta realize it. You know, it's there. You just gotta scratch it. So.
Wow. I love that. And I want to say, Dr. Burton, we appreciate it. And, a client of iProv, a great doctor, great business owner, and a friend of both RJ and mine too. So we appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah. Listen, man, anytime. So.
Brian, we'd love to have you on again. We'd love you to even guest host with us, and we could bring on one of those young guys, and they can talk about some of their struggles, and maybe you could relate to them and bounce off. But love to have you on again, and thank you so much for your time. We know you're a busy guy.
Well, I'm not as busy today as I'd like to be, but here we are. I get to spend time with my kids. So,
all right, thanks, Doc.
I get to review a chapter book summary now. So.
You're highest paid chapter review guy in the world.
I don't know.
Hey, this is great, dude. You need to be on more of these things. You're just a great speaker, great presenter. You need to do more of these things.
Okay. Pay me for them.
I'll pay you what they pay you to do that chapter book summary.
Yeah.
RJ, Dr. Brian Burton, that was a pleasure, right?
Oh, that was great. He got really into the meat of what it's like to be a practice owner. And I love that.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the most impactful tips is just the simplest one. Just start asking questions. That's how he said he got started. I know everybody seems like they're busy. If you're curious about how the practice is performing or what a good next step is, ask questions. I mean, doctors are professional question askers. All right. There's no reason you shouldn't do it about the business either.
Yeah. And your ears will tingle when you hear something that doesn't make sense to you. Your intuition will kick in, and it'll hopefully force you into action. So I love that he talked about that, because it's human nature, but we fight it a lot at work, and we're scared to look like we don't know what we're talking about. Put all that aside and just get curious.
Yeah, just get curious and talk to lots of people who have expertise in other areas. Oh
yeah, his concept of most of these consultants are free to talk to you, and that will stem ideas. That's true. I mean, if you sit down with Jordan, he's going to give you facts and figures that you didn't even know about your own business, that you don't pay a dime for. You can then take them and decide what to do with them. So I think he just had a really good insight, and obviously has been part of a turnaround practice, and that takes a special kind of business owner. So I'm happy he was on the podcast, and just hope our listeners soaked it in, and hope that they hear him say that he loves talking to other practice owners. And one of the best things I ever did in our business was starting to connect with other business owners that look just like us.
Absolutely. So, all right. Well, if you know anybody else that's like Brian, shoot us a note. We'd love to have him on the podcast. Like, comment, subscribe, share, all the things, all the buttons you can click on them for us. And we'll talk to you next time. RJ, thanks so much.
Thanks, Jordan.
All right. iProv Made Podcast out.